Welcome to the Old Man of the Three Things with JJ Redick and the Dunker Spot, Nekias, Duncan, and Steve Jones. Fellas, how we doing on this Monday morning?
Doing pretty well, sir. Hope you are. Steve, how are you?
I'm feeling great. Excited to be here. A lot of great basketball going on right now. Can't wait to dive into it.
There is a lot of great basketball going on right now. I actually, there's so much good basketball. I may have a fourth thing today that I might sneak in there. Okay. Overall today, we're going to talk Denver Nuggets. We're going to talk Boston Celtics. And Nekias has pleaded his case strongly for the last 24 hours that we include the Toronto Raptors in today's discussion. We'll save that for last. Let's start with the Denver Nuggets, who beat the Golden State Warriors last night. Nikola Jokic just on one right now. Third straight triple-double. He moved up to fourth all-time, passing LeBron James. Fellas, where do you want to start with Denver? I have a few things I want to talk about. Steve, why don't we start with you? How would you assess where they're at right now? And what gets you excited? What gets you concerned?
What gets me excited is just you can feel that championship experience from them and the fact that they know what they want to get to on both ends of the floor. I think offensively, this is a team that's going to keep pressure on you. They're going to make you sustain defense, which is hard these days, to get to their counters, run actions on both sides. I think defensively, they deserve a little bit more credit for the effort that they've put in to become more versatile as far as what they do with their personnel. I think Kentavious Caldwell-Pope has been excellent as far as navigating screens. You see so many times when they play, he's into bodies, he's active, but he's able to show a denial and then shoot the gap at the last second. And that's so valuable for Jokic. That's so valuable for their team defense. I think when you think of Denver before, it was, hey, Jokic has to be at the level. Their rotations have to be great. They're not in that space anymore. They're finding different ways to kind of add gaps. We saw Jokic in a drop. They've continued to mix that in. His timing has gotten better with the nuance as far as I don't have to show here. When I'm low as a rim protector, I can stunt and get back to mine. Being able to throw Jokic on a non-shooter or a guard, allowing him to stay closer to the rim, that's been really good for them. So in this era of offense is everything, I think having a defense that can do multiple things is so important. But the key to me is when it's winning time this year, it's winning time for Denver. And that Jokic-Murray two-man game is hard. Not a ton of answers for it, but they're adding to it. Hey, let's clear the wings. Let's get Jokic a catch. And JJ, this is an action you've talked about a lot, that pass and cut action, that chase action. Let Murray hit Jokic. He can cut either way. You defend that. It's a rescreen. Now you have to deal with that, and they keep pressure on you. Adding Aaron Gordon to the mix. For now, Jokic gets a catch. Here comes Aaron Gordon come off a back screen from Jamal Murray. Got to deal with the handoff. You show anything on that two on the ball. Here's Jokic on the short roll right to Aaron Gordon. But they set that up
which
earlier
we saw
in
last
the game.
Night. Yeah.
Where Gordon will actually screen for Murray first. So now, okay, we're sitting on this bat pick. Oh no, there's Jamal Murray flying off. I just love the little things they've done offensively to just let you know, okay, you don't really have a counter for Jokic and Murray two-man game. We can get to it in different ways. We're going to keep that pressure on you.
Real quick, and I'll let you jump in, Nekias. Your point about the screening into the two-man game, I think, is important. Because if you want to put a specific defender on Jamal Murray, they will screen, whether it's a back screen rip trying to get a layup for Michael Porter, whether it's a back screen rip for Aaron Gordon trying to create a size disadvantage, and then get to the two-man action. So if you want to keep one defender on Jamal Murray, they're figuring out different ways to create switches before the two-man action with Jokic, and I love that.
Yeah, the offense has been a lot of fun, particularly late. I'm glad Steve touched on a lot of that. Just very quickly, in the fourth quarter, overtime, 1.09 points per possession on any trip featuring Murray Jokic pick and roll, over 1.3 points per possession with any Jokic Murray dribble handoff in the fourth quarter and overtime. There isn't really anything you can do except hope that they miss. You switch it, there's a mismatch somewhere. You blitz it, they can play out a short roll with it. They do a great job of spacing around that, to both of your points. It's been a lot of fun. It's the defense for me. Denver has been a top 10 defense, or in that 10 to 12 range. This is like 0.2 of a point separating those teams in that bunch. They've essentially been a top 10 defense all year long. And considering how much noise has been around Jokic's defense over the last 3, 4, 5 years, one would hope that would get a little bit more pub than it does. Like, they're playing him a drop more. Steve already noted, like, being able to put him on a non-shooter and trusting him there. He's still very good when he's at the level because of the deflections he can get, and also just being a large human. The conditioning has gotten better. He's got better at cutting off that guard. You can't just drive around him like you could early in his career. And then you add in what KCP has been able to do, what Aaron Gordon does, what some of those guys off the bench can do. Christian Brown getting back into form. Peyton Watson has been fun all year long. Like, this isn't a team that you can just blitz and turn it into a score fest if you want to. And if you do get to that point, you get to the fourth quarter, what are you doing with Murray? What are you doing with Jokic? What are you doing with MPJ spotting up around that? What do you do with Aaron Gordon just cleaning up things from the dunker spot or from the free throw line extended, the way they use everyone as screeners late in game? But I just go back to the defense. I'm glad Steve mentioned Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. We've talked about him on my pod. All defense teams are going to be positionless this year. Like, I don't think he's going to make an all defense team, but he's absolutely been at that level when he's been healthy. Love the screen nav from him. He's taken on some tough assignments. I've just had a lot of fun watching this Denver defense fly around. It just feels like they have found the right mix of, this is what we do. We're at the level. These are what the rotations are supposed to be like. We can get more conservative. We can play with the matchups. This is just a high level defense. And I don't know if that gets enough love.
You mentioned KCP, and I've called, a Denver Golden State game. Obviously, yesterday was the Denver Golden State game. Steph has struggled in some of those games, and a lot of that has been KCP. Last night, Steph goes 6 for 19. Steph was 1 for 7 against KCP. You mentioned the screen navigation. I'm seeing a little bit, and I don't want to be like hyperbole here. I don't want to use a hyperbole, but I'm seeing a little bit of like Derrick White, Jrue Holiday in terms of high screen navigation from KCP, where Michael Malone has essentially given him the freedom. Like, the great defensive players, you have to allow them to play instinctually, and it's great. Like, this is a part of a longer conversation, but I was watching a game yesterday. It was not the Golden State Denver game, and I was watching it, and there was a mismatch in the post, and one player came on the low side for the double. The guy guarding the ball kind of adjusted his feet to try to force him to the low side. Then the guy at the top came to double, and it resulted in one of the best three-point shooters in the NBA getting a wide open three from the left wing. And I thought to myself, that's a poorly coached team, right? Defensively, as a general rule in the NBA, if you go into a game, and I felt this at times on certain teams where I'm like, we are guessing defensively. You can't guess defensively, except there are certain coaches like Joe Mazzulla with Jrue Holiday, which we'll get to in a second, who allow them to just play instinctually. And I think KCP has the trust of Michael Malone, where if there's a high screen and roll and he's guarding Steph Curry and it's at 35 feet, he may be into the ball, but then he might go under right at the point of the screen. It's that stuff that it's little stuff. Jrue Holiday does that better than anybody. Derrick White does it better than anybody. It's that stuff that I just love, where it's like, yeah, we have our rules, we have our concepts. We know we're not going under at Steph Curry at 24 feet or 25 feet, but he gives him the freedom. Sometimes he's shooting the gap. I mean, I called the Christmas Day game, and like, he's chasing Steph Curry off the ball, and like, yeah, you're not supposed to shoot the gap on Steph Curry. Sometimes the screening angle requires you to shoot the gap. And that's the stuff I love from KCP. I really do. Fourth quarter, you brought up some offensive stuff. I love this. Their clutch time defense has a defensive rating of 97.1. Like, holy shit. That's incredible. They have played the most minutes. Their 5-man lineup has played the most minutes of any 5-man lineup in the NBA. Net rating of 14.1. Let's go through some of these teams. Bucks starting 5, 15.3. Celtics starting 5, 11.7. Clippers starting 5, 12.6. Suns starting 5, 14.9. I cut it off at 225 minutes. The Mitchell, Jared Allen, Max Strus, Dean Wade, and Isaac Okoro 5-man lineup, 19.6 net rating. Oh, highest one with 225 minutes or more. Very interesting. So this starting lineup, 125 offensive rating, like, they're fucking great. The thing, and I'm glad we're talking about both the Nuggets and the Celtics today. The thing with the Nuggets and the Celtics that I have found, and I felt this way about the Nuggets last year, and in watching a bunch of the Celtics this year, and in calling that game Saturday night, the thing that both these teams have in common right now is offensively, they don't fight the game. There were times in Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum's career where they fought the game. There is just the ultimate trust. I'll get my shots. Now, their field goal attempts, both of them, average field goal attempts per game, it's down. That whole team has had to sacrifice. But there is an element of just trusting the teammates, trusting that the ball will work its way back to you. It's a simple thing, guys. It's a simple thing. Offensively, both these teams, by and large, they just make the right play every time. That's not to say it's perfect, but they just trust it and they make the right play. And that's what I see. Jokic, obviously, for the Nuggets, it starts with him, right? There's no agenda within a game. Oh, I might be able to score 40 tonight. Oh, I might take 8 shots tonight. Oh, I need Michael Porter Jr. to get going. He's wide open. They're playing him with a smaller guy. I can hit him on cuts. Like, he just reads the game. Whatever the game requires, he's going to then make the right read. And that's what I love about the Nuggets, and that's what I've loved about the Boston Celtics recently.
Yeah, Jokic is just a superhuman. He's a supercomputer, man. I love watching that dude play. Just circle quickly back to the defense with Jokic because I've been so impressed with it. Just put Jokic in the pick and roll late in games, under 0.9 points per possession allowed in the fourth quarter and overtime when he's defending a pick and roll. And you zoom out for the season-wide number, the all quarters, all that good stuff, 0.93 points per possession. That's 12th of, I think, 63 players that have defended at least 500. We got to change the calculus on how we're talking about Jokic defensively.
There you go. You guys brought up the bench. They haven't played a ton, and they did it last year in the playoffs. They haven't played a ton with Aaron Gordon at the 5. As far as I could tell, the most minutes of any lineup with him at the 5 only had played in 4 games together in 21 minutes. So not a big sample size. They had defended well, hadn't scored well. That's going to be something, obviously, once the playoffs start, that we'll see more and more of. Before we move on to the Celtics, I think this is a nice little segue. Called my first game with the A team, Mike Breen, Doris Burke, 2 Hall of Famers, that whole crew, just for not Lisa Salters, Schwabe, Tim Corrigan. Like, it was just great experience. Within the game, I may have jokingly said something to Doris, and I was like, "Oh, she's going to get me back." And we highlighted Jrue Holiday's pick and roll navigation, and she said, "It's funny. We admire what we can't do ourselves, right?" During the game, our guy Matthew Williams from ESPN on Doris's Slack channel, he sent over a text, and he was like, "JJ Redick in the tracking era, as the pick and roll ball handler defender, allowed 0.91 points per possession as the pick and roll ball handler. League average during the tracking era is 0.95. So I just want to point that out. We didn't have time on the broadcast to do it, but I just want to point that out. Technically,
that's what I'm talking about.
Technically, it's above average. All right. Better than average. All right. Hey, I have a question before actually we move to Boston, because I wanted to bring this up. This is my 4th thing. I'm going to sneak this in here. Sacramento, De'Aaron Fox playing out of his mind. They beat the Clippers last night. He's got 4 straight games with 25 points or more, 5 rebounds or more, 5 assists or more. Once again, playing at all NBA level. Here's something interesting, because I brought this up. It'll be on later this week. I brought this up in our New Islands of the League episode. The playoffs are all about matchups, and since Ty Lue took over the Los Angeles Clippers, De'Aaron Fox has created 20.3 points per game on direct drives. That's the most versus any opponent that De'Aaron Fox has created, right? Since Ty Lue took over the Clippers. And I'm looking at the standings in the Western Conference, and I think the top 4 have essentially separated themselves. And we're going to, as we get closer, we'll start talking about seeding and potential playoff matchups. Are there any easy matchups for any seed in the Western Conference in the first round? There's not, right?
No.
Right? It is super fascinating to me in looking at this. Michael Wilbon yesterday in the pregame show, and he was right. I don't think he was saying it flippantly. He said, the Phoenix Suns, at times, they look like a play-in team. And Before yesterday, they were a playing team. Now they're 6th place, right? Phoenix Suns in the first round. Who wants that matchup? Who wants that matchup? The 4 seed doesn't want that matchup. The 3 seed doesn't want that matchup. The 2 seed, the what? Like, who wants Sacramento? Who wants a healthy Dallas team? Who wants New Orleans if they're healthy? It's fascinating to me. Have you guys thought ahead about this at all?
Oh, I think it's gonna be nasty. For me, it's remove the seeds. It's gonna be a battle because your reward for having a great season and being a top 2 seed is potentially Luka and or a LeBron team and or a Steph Curry team, and that seems really fair. It's just like I feel like every few weeks we rotate and the team is on a rise. Here come the Kings. Here come the Suns. Here come the Clippers, and it's not wrong. And then it's like, wait, what happened to them? Oh, they just happened to lose 4 games. 4 of the last 10 games. They're looking rough right now. And it's like, no, not like all these teams end up winning 6 or 7 out of 10. I don't know who wants to play Denver, who wants to sign up for the Thunder, who wants to sign up for the size of the Wolves. None of it sounds fun.
None of it sounds fun. Yeah,
but just think about what you said. Oh, this team only won 60% of their games over this stretch. They have now slipped into the play-in. It's dumb. It's really dumb. Like 5 through 8 separated by half a game right now. We are recording this. This will just be different tomorrow.
This will be different tomorrow. Yes, exactly. All right, let's get to the Boston Celtics. Here's just a general thought starter for us. It feels like they have sort of separated themselves, and they are the best team in the NBA, and that's unquestionably they are the best team in the NBA. What really excites me about their team, I mentioned just playing the right way. It is 100% their intuitiveness. I think it's like it's something that Joe really stresses, but it has become so intuitive. They are just excellent at finding the right matchups offensively, and defensively, they're just all over the place. They can match up so many different ways. Jrue Holiday, it feels like this to me. Jrue Holiday and Joe Mazzulla as a coach-player pairing on the defensive end is like a perfect match. And the fact that they have then Derrick White, who can essentially function full-time as the point of attack guy, and Joe can just be creative with the way he uses Jrue, sometimes with matchups, sometimes as essentially a roamer and a free safety guy. When they go to their zone and Jrue starts in the middle, it's like, just go be instinctual. So that stuff to me is like super, super exciting. Do you feel like they've just completely separated themselves? If we're sort of tiering out these teams, that the Celtics are the tier 1 and then everybody else kind of has to go to a different tier?
I think for me, like at the very least, that's the case in the East right now. Like there are some matchups as we get to playoff time that this team could bother Boston, or if Boston stops playing the right way offensively, you can knock them out if you get the hot shooting, whatever the case may be. But just on balance, they are the best team in the East, and they have been the best team in the league this year. And I'm glad you started with the defense. Like, what's funny to me as I tap into Boston games, we've talked about them over the last few years. Like, they'll put Robert Williams on a wing that doesn't shoot, or now they're doing it with Kristaps. They can just cycle through different roamers if they want to, which is funny to me. Hey, let's let Jayson Tatum, 6'10" dude, just fly around and conserve energy offensively, but also he could be impactful. Let's just move Kristaps around the board. Let's move Jrue around the board. Have him in the middle of the zone if you want to, whenever we go to the zone. Like, you can't get a beat on Boston defensively, on top of they have really good guys that can defend your top stuff. So I just really enjoy what they do on that end.
And think about it, how good Al Horford still is defensively, and he's not necessarily the key to what they do anymore defensively. I think that's insane. And I'm glad you mentioned Porzingis on a roamer. I've really liked the work they've done with Porzingis as far as saying, hey, we have you in a drop. That's fantastic. If someone has it going, come up above 3-point line and drop back. If we put you on a non-shooter, which I like that the Knicks kind of had it going, they were like, you know what, actually, let's dip into our bag of tricks. Let's go ahead and put Kristaps Porzingis on Precious, and let's work through it. There was a play in that Knick game. I think it was in transition. Porzingis had been guarding Precious Achiuwa, and this is where it stood out to me that I think Boston has a completely different level they can get to defensively. Josh Hart just nods to Precious, like, hey, go screen for Jalen Brunson, because KP's like below the 3-point line. KP sees it. Jaylen Brown's right there, just pushes him in the back. Actually, big dog, you take this. You take this switch. And then Precious is like, all right, cool. Jrue Holiday's harassing the ball. And then Josh Hart's like, you know what? Fine, I got it, because Porzingis is guarding me. And Porzingis is like, hey, Jaylen Brown, you stay up there, buddy. You stay right up there. And now Jalen's like, cool, I can switch. Drew's still harassing the ball. Jalen's like, forget this. I'm a drive. And guess who's right there in the paint? Kristaps Porzingis. And I was like, oh, no, they are locked in.
I said this late in the game, and it's funny because I was talking to Josh, and I think we were talking about that exact same play yesterday. He actually called me about a wine shop that was really good, but we ended up talking about the Celtics a bunch for 30 minutes. But I said this late in the game with the Boston Celtics defensively, they rarely have to put 2 on the ball. And basketball, to me, it goes back to let's say the Denver Nuggets 2-man game with Jamal Murray and Jokic. You're forced to make some difficult decisions. It goes back to Steph Curry and Draymond and their 2-man action. You're forced to make some difficult decisions. The thing that, if you break down basketball, can you get 2 on the ball? Like that's the goal offensively. Can you get 2 on the ball? Can you create a 2-on-1? Can you create a 4-on-3? And the Boston Celtics, and I know Joe emphasizes this, they want to stay out of rotations, and because of their personnel, they don't have to be in rotation that much. Particularly like against the Knicks, Jalen Brunson's like the one guy that can sort of create his own offense. There's no Julius Randle. That's not to say DiVincenzo's not awesome, or Alec Burks or Bogdanovich. They can't do it at times. But like as a primary shot creator, they've got Jalen Brunson. And they were totally content with keeping 1 on the ball. And over the course of 48 minutes, that's going to lead to some really good things defensively, particularly with the personnel that they have.
I have a question, because it ties back to what you mentioned earlier as far as the concepts. Those guys like Jrue Holiday and Derrick White can now make the rotations they want to and use their activity as far as like dictating terms. Do you feel like that's been an important piece for Boston as far as, hey, we know where the help is going to be at. We can kind of color within the lines and show help knowing we can recover or someone's got our back, as opposed to there's 2 on the ball, I have to do this.
Right. I think that's important. I would say it's not just those 2 guys, though. To your point about Tatum and Brown, even Brown on the ball as an ISO defender has been excellent this year, and so it's across the board. There were times Al Horford ended up on a wing player, and he's able to stay in front, and it's multiple moves, it's multiple counters, and it's like, oh, it's a contested shot, right? It's all of that stuff. So when they do want to be impactful off of certain players, right, based on personnel, oh, okay, I can be in help here. I can roam a little bit more here. It all starts to me with across the board, point of attack, they're not getting beat as much as some other teams. And by the way, I would say this too with Derrick White and Jrue Holiday. They are 2 of the best guards I've ever seen, where when they do get beat, they recover. And so sometimes they don't even overhelp on if Derrick White against Miami on Super Bowl Sunday got absolutely crossed by Tyler Hero in the right slot, left to right crossover. Like, he was beat. Nearly any other guard in the league, Tyler Hero is going to get an uncontested floater or layup at the rim. Derrick White recovered and blocked the shot out of bounds. Like that, it's a rarity. It's a rarity. It's almost like, yeah, we can have all these rules and we can have all these schemes. Like if I'm a coach, right, we can do all that. That's great. When you have the personnel that the Boston Celtics have, it just opens up a world of possibilities. It does. And because Joe Mazzulla is so creative and thoughtful about all of these matchups, right? It goes back to, like, he started Jrue Holiday on Joel Embiid. They guarded him with Jrue Holiday for 24 half-court possessions the first time they played Philadelphia. It's stuff like that that is just so cool to me. And look, it's like a perfect marriage, right? It's a perfect marriage between a coach who understands all of this stuff at a very high level and having smart, instinctual, awesome individual defenders. Anything else you guys want to touch on with Boston?
I wanted to really quickly add the Jrue Holiday offensive possessions. They feel very timely. The usage as far as him being in the post, him being an off-ball screener for Tatum and Brown, him being an on-ball screener for Tatum and Brown. I just think that kind of pops because they play in waves, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait, that is Jrue Holiday in the post. No one's helping. Oh, wait, that's a roll. They didn't switch. Look at where the ball is being kicked to. That kind of stuff is where I'm like, it just feels timely because it's hard to just lock in on one person. Jaylen Brown starts cooking, now he's good. Porzingis catches your defense in a rotation you can't make. Oh, no. Here's Jayson Tatum driving. Like that blend, but when Jrue hit, the way they use him just kind of feels important, especially going forward in the playoffs.
I'll just quickly bounce off of that with the Jrue timeliness. And just in general, like decision-making has been like the question that I've had for Boston heading into the year. We know what kind of talent they have, et cetera. Like being able to, one, take some of the pressure off of Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown when you can get those timely possessions from Jrue. You can have Derrick White initiate so much of your offense. Like the pick and roll between Derrick White and Kristaps Porzingis has been insane all year long when they've been off the floor. It limits some of that decision-making tree for those guys. And then also like think about the classic Steve point. Think about who they're passing the ball to. If Jaylen Brown now gets to attack a tilted defense, if Jrue gets to attack a tilted defense, and this is with Jrue likely getting your third best perimeter defender, just because of who Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown are. Jrue has that advantage. Jayson Tatum can now attack a tilted defense. Like it just makes life so much easier for them. And then just a quick question I'll toss to both of you. How many all defensive candidates do the Celtics get this year? Is it Jrue and Derrick? Are they both making the team this year?
Oh, interesting. I think Derrick makes the team. I'm pretty confident in that. I think Kristaps Porzingis, if we had a third team, maybe would get some consideration. He likely won't be in the top 10. But I don't know that Jrue gets it this year. I don't know. By the way, I don't know that he should or he shouldn't. I haven't really thought that much about all defense team. I'm offensively inclined, Nekias. I'm offensively inclined. To your point, real quick. So I want to follow up on two things you guys said. The Jrue offense stuff is really interesting to me. And Joe Mazzulla talked about this with our crew pregame. He said every game is different for Jrue. In Milwaukee, he was the primary ball handler. He was the point guard. He was asked to create offense. He was going to run pick and roll. Depending on how the other team matches up, sometimes he's a screener. Sometimes he's an initiator. Sometimes he's just a spot-up shooter. And every game has been different for him. You mentioned Derrick White. I should sometimes on a broadcast, I try to stay away from like the super advanced stats, and we like to use them on this podcast. And I said Derrick White has been a top 5 pick and roll ball handler this year. And he has. I mean, going into that game, he was 4th in the NBA points per direct pick as the ball handler. And it's interesting because you bring up the Kristaps thing. One thing that they are doing a ton of late game is depending on the matchup, right? So if they have the weakest perimeter defender on Derrick White, he's then initiating the offense, and Jayson Tatum is the screener. If you don't want to switch, Derrick White can get downhill and make a play. If you do want to switch, all right, we're going to attack that matchup and play out of that. We've got, let's say it's Atlanta. We've got Trae Young now on Jayson Tatum, 2 on the ball. Again, 2 on the ball. That's the entire late game stuff lately for Boston over the last 10 games of the clutch games literally has been, let's get the ball to Jayson Tatum in some fashion, whether it's out of Spain pick and roll, whether it's out of a side pick and roll with Derrick White, whether it's up at the top, and let's get him a matchup he wants and then play out of that. And right now he's making great decisions out of that. All right. Third segment here.
I can feel the excitement. Goodness.
You know what I love? Let me tell you what I love. I love doing this podcast with you guys, and I love doing this podcast with Legs because we really do. The goal of this podcast, this Monday show, The Old Man and the Three Things, was always to cover the entire NBA. Our Thursday show is guest dependent. I know you guys cover the entire NBA on the Dunker Spot. When I do studio shows, we're talking about the same 5 or 6 teams and the same 5 or 6 players all the time. I love that we get to do a segment with legs on Brandon Miller. I love that. All right. And so a part of me really loves that we're going to talk about the Toronto Raptors today. Nekias, let's go. Lead us here. Lead us here. Take over the lead.
I think with Toronto, I'm more intrigued than anything. Like, I feel like I've kind of slotted in as like the numbers guy on these episodes. Like, I wish there was like a magic, here's an indicator that the Raptors are about to win 8 of their last 10. Like, I don't have a specific number on that front outside of they are just running all over the place. Post-trade deadline, like no team has gotten out and transitioned more to them, which makes sense. Emmanuel Quickley is a one-man fast break. Scotty Barnes can grab and go. RJ Barrett, he's missed a couple of games with how he's coming back. He's obviously someone that can grab and go. So like the transition offense has been fun. But it's more that post-All-Star break now, or post-trade deadline, rather, like having Jakob Poeltl just fully back in the fold, I think his screening and decision-making really helps that half-court offense. And something that I've been monitoring with Toronto all year long, with Darko coming in first year, okay, what exactly are they trying to get to? Like, there are some personnel limitations, and this is something that Steve and I talked about earlier in the year. I love this set. I love this action. I love the idea, oh, snap, they're still seeing a bunch of switches and unders. What happens here? And so I do love that Jakob Poeltl's come back in and has just been like one of, if not the best screener in basketball since. We're not going to talk about the finishing right now, but the screening portion, like I think that really helps Emmanuel Quickley as he tries to work through some of the finishing issues since he's been in Toronto. I think overall he's fine, but in Toronto specifically, he hasn't been fun inside the arc. But like he makes life easier for them. And then just conceptually with Toronto, being able to go side to side. We may start with a pick and roll with Emmanuel Quickley or with RJ Barrett. If it doesn't work, let's toss it back to Jakob Poeltl. We'll go to the other side with a handoff. He just nails a guy. And now we're generating some downhill pressure. And it's giving those young guys the ability to make reads. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. But I do love conceptually that you're getting that with Jakob Poeltl back in the fold. And now you add Kelly Olynyk with that second unit, who gives you that same thing, good screener, can roll, can pop, can go side to side for you. But even when he's not directly involved, him being able to space above the break, space at the opposite wing, removes the help defender. It opens up, with the second unit in particular, more cuts and more off-ball movement for Grady Dick, more cuts and off-ball movement for Bruce Brown. Ochai Abaji's been able to carve out some space as a cutter as well. And so I just look at Toronto like, again, conceptually, I like what you're trying to build here. And then within this playoff/play-in race, as Trae Young's about to be out for a month, Onyeka Okongwu's in a walking boot. He's going to be out for another couple of weeks. You look at Atlanta, and I guess you look at everything that's happening in Brooklyn right now, which I don't, that situation's make me sad. We're not going to talk about that right now. But I just kind of wonder how much of a play-in push does Toronto make? Like, they have the top 6 protected first-round pick. Do they even want to push for that? And in light of what Atlanta might look like, a solid win over Orlando yesterday, as we record on a Monday, but no Paolo, he was sick, he was out. I'm just kind of monitoring what happens with that 10, and I guess Toronto's technically 12, but I think they're going to pass Brooklyn, to be frank about it. I'm just curious to see like what direction both of those teams go in.
Get ready to learn pull up, buddy. DeJounte Murray's on a mission. I'll just keep that in the back of your mind. Also, didn't you say the Hawks season was going to be saved?
I thought so.
He said Jalen Johnson was going to save the Hawks.
Was 21-9-7 last night for Jalen Johnson. Like he's been playing pretty solid. But I took the L on that one.
Well, only pointing out because technically he could right now.
Yeah, that's true.
He could.
That's true.
Yeah.
There's
still time, Nekias. Nobody's saying your take was wrong. Nobody was saying that. Nobody's saying you still have, what is it, 24 games that they have left to play? No one's saying that. I think what's interesting to me to watch for the next month is how Atlanta plays. So you're spot on. You're spot on about Toronto. What are they trying to do? Because in some ways, this is now the 3rd or 4th year where we're asking that. What are they trying to do? Right? They certainly have a lot of good basketball players on their team and an all-star in Scotty Barnes. Do they make this push? The more interesting thing to me is how does Atlanta play for the next month? Because I think Quinn Snyder offensively has really introduced a lot of stuff this year. We've kind of geeked out on I guess what is called now 5 slot instead of 5 out, which has given a little bit more space and has allowed Atlanta to get to some cool second side actions with pin downs and dribble handoffs out of what is normal delay, just moving that big over to the slot, right? We've geeked out about that. We've geeked out about the Spain pick and roll to a flare with Tyrese Halliburton, right? Quinn Snyder offensively, because of Trae Young and Bogdanovich, they can run some cool stuff. How do they defend for the next month? I am really interested to see, after whatever amount of games it is, 14, 15 games for the next month, how their defense looks, what the numbers say, but how does it look? Can they get to some more creative stuff? That, to me, is interesting because, and this is not speculation, because if we're talking about what direction you're going in, as you are with the Raptors, the interesting thing is, what direction are the Hawks going in after this season?
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting to me. But I agree with you. Everything you said about the Raptors, I agree with. And I do love Jakob Poeltl. I just want to say that. Let me also say that. I love that.
There we go. Just to quickly bounce off of that, switchiest game of the season for the Atlanta Hawks yesterday against Orlando, which part of that is just Orlando. You can switch against them. That's something we've been monitoring all year long. But like, I also thought about it. I was going through that game this morning. With Trae Young out a month, like the smallest person in the rotation for Atlanta, high key might just be DeJounte at this point, which should make it a little bit easier for them to switch. Because I think part of why they've been so blitz heavy and so two on the ball heavy, and I have applauded Trae Young's defensive effort this year. I feel like that deserves a little bit more love.
I have as well. I'm on the record as it. I've done it.
There we go. And so, like, even with that improved effort, like, he is still the smallest guy on the court, and that is still just an element of we got to put two on the ball here so you don't just give up favorable switches, or we're not switching and doubling and then trying to figure out rotations. Because with Atlanta, their rotations have been a mess behind their doubles and behind the blitzes and pick and roll for most of the year. And I've loved the steps that Jalen Johnson has taken in particular, but he's not there yet, nailing it all the time. With Trae Young out of there, like, in theory, you could switch a little bit more. You can't simplify things. So as you brought up, like, how creative will Atlanta get defensively? I wonder if this is now their excuse to get more basic, get more bland. Let's just keep this in front. We have collective size now. We may get beat, but at the very least, we can shrink the floor a little bit more. We're not going to be in rotation as much. Does that get them to be like a top 20 defense the rest of the year? And if you can get enough of the pull-up shooting from DeJounte Murray, if you can get enough of the switch hunting, if you do get two on the ball, DeJounte was targeting Joe Ingles a little bit late in that game. Jalen Johnson got some short roll fun out of that. I really enjoy him operating open space. Like, can you carve out enough of the offense there? Are they 13th in offense, 19th in defense to close out the year? Is that enough to hold on to the 10 seed? This is where we're at in this podcast. But, like, is that enough to where they can hold on? I'm intrigued by the bottom of the play-in race.
Guys, you went here. Don't say this is where we're at in the podcast. This was the route. I give you guys the freedom to talk about what you want to talk about. You chose this. You chose this.
No,
I love
regrets.
it.
I'm just saying.
So correct me if I'm wrong. Before this Trae Young injury, Hawks were still number one in terms of most blitzes in the league, right? You can correct me. I'll give you time to do that. Those blitz numbers and two on the ball, because again, I like thematic podcasts. You know, I love when there's through lines through a podcast. Two on the ball, really hard to defend when you put two on the ball. It just is. I'm interested to see over the next month that those switching numbers and the blitz numbers really fast.
Atlanta's still number one.
Atlanta's still number one in blitzes. All right, fellas, as always, a true pleasure hanging with you guys, talking shop, talking ball. Be well. This has been another episode of The Old Man and the Three Things with JJ Redick and the Dunker Spot, Nekias Duncan and Steve Jones.